Welcome back. I'm here today with Richard Del Monte. Richard is the founder of the Monte Group. It's a group that is focused on transitioning wealth to the next generation. Richard, welcome to today's show.
Thank you. It's great to be with you, Alan.
So Richard, very unique business model that you have. Can you give me some of your background, how you got to where you are today? And
Yeah, I started off with about 25 years in the financial advisory business, and I started having clients pass away and started noticing that some crazy things started happening with the kids when they started inheriting the money that we had worked so hard to cultivate over these years. And the most egregious thing that happened was some kids came into us and said, "We're going to fire you," which no big deal, you get fired. But he said, "We're giving it to a guy who said he can double the money in 90 days." Oh, and I thought, whoa, what on earth? How could this be happening? That this family has worked for all these years to build this wealth, cultivate it, take good care of it, protect it from tax, grow it safely, and then it goes to a shyster who's going to lose it all for them. And I realized that I needed to step back and look at this family, not from the husband and wife as my clients, but as the whole family together as a structure. And then from that perspective, you have to look at what can you do for this family as a whole, as a unit, and what does the next generation need so that they can be successful when they inherit the money. And that was a whole new eye opener for me. It was like, okay, this is all, and it's not done. We don't really ever do anything in that area in most financial services.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, what does our culture teach us about where happiness comes from?
Well, obviously, happiness comes from having a lot of stuff, right? And he who has the most toys wins is one of the precepts of our culture. And unfortunately, it doesn't really bring happiness having more things. Being successful in business gives you some sense of satisfaction, but it also brings with it a lot of baggage, especially for families that are involved. And so it's really, happiness really comes from being fulfilled. And so how do you get fulfillment? And you get fulfillment by knowing your purpose, your life's purpose, and what you're meant to do, and doing great things for other people, being of service to others. And I think that we as a culture don't really recognize that as much as we should.
That's interesting you bring that up, because ultimately, the older people get, the more they realize
Totally.
that it's not about the money.
Totally, right.
Now, you just wrote a book, Endless Inheritance.
I did.
And what inspired you to write on this, and what's the focus?
The focus is on this whole problem. We describe the problem that families face when they're trying to transition wealth. And there's studies, I'm sure you know these studies, but about 70% of wealth is lost when it transitions to the next generation. They either spend it all, or they end up, the family relationships fall apart because the money is there. And so we want to make sure that people understand that, and that they don't have to just sit back and take that. And that happens in every single generation. If your money is fortunate enough to survive your kids' generation, then when it gets transitioned to your grandkids, it's going to be another 70% haircut. So it's really, it's just endemic, and it's not really about a financial thing at all. It's really about just human beings. And it's really caused by families who don't trust each other, don't communicate well, and the children, the heirs, are not prepared for the roles and responsibilities they're going to have when they inherit the money. So what we decided was, we're going to go do all those things for people. We're going to teach families to communicate well. We're going to help them understand their roles and responsibilities, and we're going to build trust. The book is about that. It helps people understand what the problems are, what they can do about it. And there's exercises in every chapter that actually help them to know how to do it themselves. They don't have to go out and hire an advisor if they don't want to. They could just use the book, and they can start building closer family relationships in their own family.
Why do you think the element of distrust runs rampant, especially among family members?
For sure, yeah. It just, people don't know how to communicate. We end up getting our biggest upsets in our families. If you think about it, the times when we get most incensed very often is with family members. And we treat our family members worse than we treat strangers in many cases. And why is that? Well, it's because we've had these experiences in our family that go back, that they're really basically unresolved conflicts that have occurred, and they've never been able to get resolved. And so that's really where the trust problems come from.
And with the Del Monte Group, that's one of the things that you help to establish is better communication within the family structure.
For sure, it's crucial.
You know, Richard, we're running up against the break.
Okay.
I need to take a quick break, and we'll be back more with, talking about transitioning wealth to the next generation. I'm here today with Richard Del Monte. He is the founder of the Del Monte Group. We'll be right back after these messages.
I love fishing, with my family.
I think it would be easier to use a net.
It was so much fun.
The times when we are together, it makes it all the more worth it.
Having Dad teach them how to cast a fly rod, and
as long as we're doing stuff together, we're having fun.
Some people see a father and a son fishing together, while others see a succession plan. Welcome back. I'm here today with Richard Del Monte, and we've been talking about wealth transition to the next generation. And of course, you wrote this book called Endless Inheritance, where you move a family from feuding to basically getting along and better communication. So it says moving from feuding to flourishing, the affluent family. So, I want to spend a little time on this family aspect. A lot of people say they thought they knew their brothers and sisters until one of their parents dies, and then everything else, the whole family dynamic changes. So, what would you say if you could single out the biggest threat to family unity? It would be.
Okay, so the biggest threat to family unity is not conflicts that happen, but the conflicts that never get resolved. They just kind of linger in the family. And they just, conflicts, if you have a conflict that doesn't get resolved, it goes from basically a frustration to a resentment, and then it just keeps building in the background, and it all goes all the way to revenge if it's never addressed. So I have situations where, I'll ask families, do you have a conflict that's never been resolved with your husband or your wife or your child or your mother or whatever? And they'll say, yes. How long ago was it? 30 years ago. What was the intensity 30 years ago? 10. What's the intensity today? 10. It's just always there. And we've had situations where we would get the family together and say, okay, what's the issue? And we would get them to resolve it and discuss it with each other. And within 45 minutes, this thing that had been festering in this family for 30 years is gone. They're hugging each other and crying. So there's just no avenue to get these things resolved in the family. They just don't really have it. So one of the things you can do is just create a structure for them to be able to know how to, get these conflicts resolved when they come up, because they're going to come up.
What's the right time to start this process of getting the family all on the same page?
Yesterday.
Okay.
Okay. There's no you can't start too early. You can start with them when they're kids. There's all kinds of things you can model behavior that is really going to teach them a lot, because you can say whatever you want, but the kids watch what you do. And if you're modeling behavior with your wife or your husband, and you're showing them that you can resolve these conflicts, and that you are treating each other with love and respect, and you treat your children with love and respect, and you don't abuse them emotionally like a lot of families do. That's the biggest thing that needs to happen in a family, and it can start. There's no age too soon.
I've noticed that over the years that second generation does not necessarily appreciate what the first generation who created the wealth has gone through.
They don't.
And is there anything in that process where you can help to build a better understanding, especially I think in transitioning? When you look at family offices today, I think there's been a standout among the family offices. The Mars family has been able to successfully transition wealth to 7 generations.
They have. And why do they do that? They have a commitment to it. They understand that they have to be able to keep the family going. They have to be able to keep creating opportunities for the family to get together, to resolve conflicts, to solve problems, to learn how to be leaders of the next generation. They create those conditions for each other, for each generation. They perpetuate it. And if you leave it to chance, then in most cases money can be such a toxic ingredient to a family. It's like I always liken it to the Mississippi River. You know, if you don't channel it well, when it floods, it's going to be devastating. But if you channel it properly and you recognize the power of it and what it can do for good and for bad, you know, to kind of accelerate the bad behaviors and also accelerate good behaviors and encourage them, you really get the power of it. Then you can make a huge difference in your family.
You know, in today's world, the families oftentimes, you may have another, you know, remarriage or something like that, which kind of creates an interesting dynamic from the standpoint of the children, the Brady Bunch parody,
right?
You know, with that.
Right.
How do you approach that?
Great question, and that's so common with families with second marriages, and you know, among the children and the parents. And it's really about creating understanding and looking at each person. You know, we always tend to think that our point of view is not a point of view or a perspective, but it's the fact. You know, we can go out and find all kinds of evidence to back up our how we see things as this is the way it is. And so then when we think that we're right, we end up behaving like that to other people, that we're right, and we make other people wrong, and we end up creating kind of a win-lose situation in families. And I think it really behooves people to sit back and understand how do other people in the family perceive these situations? How must the stepmom perceive us? What's her experience like trying to integrate into this family when she obviously was not desired to come into the family? It wasn't the kid's desire to have their parents break up. You know, so it's really about understanding each other's perspectives, and we don't encourage that. We don't really ever even recognize that that's something that needs to be done. So we really encourage people to do that. You know,
when you're talking about this endless inheritance, will you often try to get them to focus on things other than the material items in the transition?
Yeah, it's really not about the material at all. Sometimes the material items can be a tool that we use to do training. Yeah. For example, you know, if the family we want to create some educational opportunities for the next generation. We call them the rising generation. Now, a lot of people call them G2 or whatever, but we try to call them the rising generation. To give them opportunities to work together, we'll say, here's an opportunity to set up like a family donor advised fund. We try to steer away from foundations because of all the complexity of those things. But it could be a donor advised fund, or it could be a family bank. And the opportunity is for the kids to understand, what can we do with this money? What can we do for good that we all can agree on? And how do we work together as a team to make this happen? So they have to learn how to work together and understand each other's idiosyncrasies and their strengths and lack of strengths, lesser strengths, and understanding each other. That's the whole key. So you can use money as a tool to encourage the right kinds of behaviors.
I'm visiting here today with Richard Del Monte. He is the founder of the Del Monte Group, a group that focuses on helping families transition wealth from one generation to the next. And also he is the author of the book, Endless Inheritance, How to Help a Family Go from Feuding to Working Together.
When I grow up, I want to work with very successful people.
I want to advise people so that they can pay less tax.
Hang out with my clients on the golf course.
Fishing.
And on their private yachts.
They will all be my friends too.
I want to work with the VCs who will fund the next Fortune 500 company.
When I grow up, I want to be just like my dad.
Money won't buy you happiness in life, but we can help take care of your financial affairs so you can focus on what's really important. Welcome back. I'm visiting here today with Richard Del Monte, and we've been talking about transitioning wealth from one generation to the next. Yeah, this is what he specializes in at the Del Monte Group. When I go back and talk about this family transition, we've all seen it in the papers, how to avoid the conflicts. I remember there was a family I actually worked with, but they were very famous in the National Enquirer. That would be the Crosby family, Bing Crosby. Mm-hmm. There was a first and a second marriage, and when the second marriage happened, the second wife did not necessarily, she had her own family now, mm-hmm. and she wanted to move things forward. So there was a conflict obvious to that, and I think that we've seen it a lot in society of, where you have the feuding within the family. Mm-hmm. What's the best way to avoid that?
Well, it helps to understand that the underlying cause of these feuds is what we call reactive patterns, that are things that happened in your past. So for example, you might have had some experience in your childhood that when you're in your family and you're having relationships with people, that those bad experiences from your childhood get triggered, and you end up becoming very emotional and and very distraught. People, the level of emotional involvement just goes way skyrocketing. And I'll give you an example. So I have a family who the husband and wife are brilliant business owners and entrepreneurs, and they're trying to transition their wealth to the next generation, to their children who are trying to take it over. And the husband and wife, the husband has a way of sort of being. He's kind of like, the wife sees him as a troublemaker, like he causes problems for everybody and doesn't make everything run smooth. So, and the wife just reacts like you can't even believe the way that she will react with him, and she just can't even control herself. And so when we got down, we tried to go back and look, and we asked her, what happened? When's the first time you ever had an experience like this? Mm-hmm. And she said, when I was 6 years old, my little sister, was a troublemaker. And she ended up getting all the attention in the family. And I was the good girl, and I never got any attention from my parents. And so this troublemaker got all the attention, and I just resented it. It made me, infuriated. So now here, fast forward 50, 60 years, her husband is exhibiting the same behavior. What happens to her? She's not even able to be a 60-year-old wife. She reverts to being a 6-year-old. And she's basically a 6-year-old is running her life. And they're having these fights between her husband and her, and they have nothing to do with them. It's really about something that never got resolved when she was a kid. So that stuff happens over and over and over again. Sometimes you might see something like your wife makes a funny look on her face, and it reminds you of your mom doing something when you were young, and you just kind of explode. It's like these triggers that are in us that we aim them at our family members and not at other people.
Do you ever, as you're working with families, do you put incentives in front of them to get them to have a higher level of trust? And if so, what would some of the incentives be?
Well, you basically show them the downside to what's happening when they don't have trust. And the best way is like for stories. Unfortunately, I have a story about my own family that is really sad. My father died 3 years ago, and he didn't have a whole lot of money, but he left my sister an extra $8,000 in a little Totten trust, a little bank account, and he didn't tell my brother. So when my brother found out about it, my father, we had just all been there holding his hand, and saying goodbye to him and everything when he passed away, and they hadn't even come to pick him up yet. And my brother and sister got into it about this money. My sister said, "I'll give you half. It's fine," And my brother wanted nothing to do with it because he said that he believed that my sister manipulated my father into giving her that money, and nothing you could say would ever talk him out of it. And they haven't spoken since. It's been 3 years over this $8,000.
Isn't that interesting?
People equate money with love, unfortunately. So one thing I could tell people is be very careful if you leave more money to one child than the other, because if you leave $5 more to one kid than the other, the kids who got $5 less are going to think that they weren't loved as much.
When you look at incentive trusts and setting those up, what are some of the drawbacks? In other words, you mentioned there about helping to get people to understand, that by not getting along, here's what can happen. But as you walk through this process with helping to give incentive for kids to get along, what are some of the drawbacks?
Well, if you use an incentive trust, people will they'll create living trusts and these documents that will try to basically say that they want kids to do certain things after the parents are gone, and if they do, they'll get money. So for example, some common ones are you have to get a 4-year degree, you have to be fully employed, sometimes they have to be the religion of the parents. There's all these different number of things that could happen, and they end up being completely counterproductive. The kids feel resentful, they feel like they're being run from the grave, controlled from the grave, and they end up actually actively working to undermine the very things that the parents want to do, incentivize. They just don't work. So really, it's far better to use a different approach that we could probably talk about.
Have you ever seen, in the wills and the trust, that if any of the kids, draw opposition to what I've outlined, you get $1?
Yeah. That's really common.
Very common?
Yeah, it shuts them
does
up.
it work?
I mean, it does work, but it's, it doesn't. I mean, it doesn't facilitate the family getting along better.
Yeah.
People don't often think about what's going to be the repercussions on my family of these steps that I'm taking. They make complete sense to me from my perspective, but how's it going to be received over there?
And in unifying a family, have you taken an approach of, helping families create mission statements and objectives of working together?
Sure. The first step is making sure that the family gets their conflicts resolved. That's like, kindergarten. You have to do that level first before anybody can do anything else. Once they get, because a lot of people, who wants to work together with their brother if they can't stand them?
Yeah.
So you got to get to where they can actually work together and they like each other and the conflicts are resolved. Then you go to doing things like creating mission statements, figuring out what's our purpose. What are we going to do with the extra money that we have? Without some kind of a goal, people are just left to wander around in the desert on their own, go in their own direction, and it doesn't facilitate the family sticking together.
Yeah, you mentioned that people going their own direction. It seems like when the larger the family is, or the older they get, they kind of pair off and
They do.
Divide up. But how do you help families stay united? Is there a way to do that?
Sure, there is. The first thing is they have to understand each other and be able to work together and get along. But also, if the family comes to understand that each individual family member, that the family itself is not successful unless every single member of the family is living a fulfilled life, and the kids all get that they can get that from their family, there's no way that you couldn't drive that family apart. So it's really about creating that kind of an environment where the family individuals realize the source of me, the best source for me to be able to get what I need in life is coming from the family.
Is there a process or a period of time that you recommend families stay in contact through reunions and such?
Yeah, reunions are so much fun.
How often? What's the ideal for getting families
At least,
together?
I would say annually, if it's a nuclear family.
Yeah.
And you want to combine some kind of educational opportunities, some kind of plan, doing some work together, doing some kind of family governance type work, and some fun. So we see families that go on cruise ships. They have family gatherings. They'll do some family business of the family, and then family fun. And it just makes kind of mixes it all up and makes people want to come back. I have a client who was when we first met him, he was, to get people to come to the family meetings, he was giving everybody $100 when they walked in the door. That's the only way he could get them there. It was so sad. I love this man. But it was like, really, that's the only way you can get him in the door is to give him $100? Let's make it a fascinating, interesting program that draws them in. You don't have to bribe them.
Very good. I'm visiting here today with Richard Del Monte. He's the author of the book Endless Inheritance. Richard, I need to take a quick break. Can you stay for this last segment?
Sure.
Okay. We'll be right back after these messages.
He's the world's most trustworthy man. Tax filing deadlines are scheduled around his vacation calendar. The IRS agent who audited his client apologized.
I don't always advise people on their taxes, but when I do, I save them every penny legally possible.
GROCO CPAs and Advisors.
Come to GROCO and stay wealthy, my friend.
Welcome back. I'm here today with Richard Del Monte. He is the founder of the Monte Group, a group that focuses on helping wealth transition from one generation to the next. Richard, we've talked about the family dynamics and family unity. In the last segment, you talked about the dad who motivated the kids to come to the reunion with $100. How effective is it when parents use money to motivate and incentivize their kids?
Generally speaking, it works for a very short period of time, but it doesn't have any lasting impact. It doesn't work long term to motivate people. It's not a good motivator. It becomes routine, and they just kind of accept it, and it doesn't work long term. What really motivates people is the opportunity to do something meaningful, and to do it with your family members who you love very much. That's what motivates people to do good things. Family philanthropy is a great thing to do together, where everybody feels like, wow, we're doing something together. Look what we can accomplish together with our family's resources, with our success, what we can actually do with it. It's really a lot better to go that way.
Now, a person that wants to use your services, how would they go about contacting you?
They can call us. We're in Alamo, California, in the San Francisco Bay Area. They can also Google us. We're on our website is aplaceofpossibility.com.
Aplaceofpossibility.com.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you what's the ideal family that you want to work with? Is there a certain level of income or dynamics?
No, it's just anybody that really wants to that gets the joke. It's really about getting the joke, realizing that our family is not firing on all cylinders or not functioning as well as we could, and even if they are, that down the road this could really go sour when the mom and dad are gone or when they're out of the picture. A lot of times the mom and dad say to us, "My family gets along great. I don't need to do any of this stuff." And we'll say, yeah, they get along great as siblings, but what about when they have to be business partners with each other, or one's the trustee and the other ones are beneficiaries, and they have no planning for that, no practice on the field doing that kind of stuff, working together in that way. How could you possibly expect it to work well when they have no experience? So
now, I had a client, very good friend. The mother, she wanted me to come in as a trustee for the kids after she was gone.
Yeah.
And so I said, well, if you want me to do that, then I want you to call a meeting with all your kids, and I'm in the room with you, and I want you to tell that to them exactly what.
Oh.
And I could have swore it was World War III.
Sure. Sure.
But do you advise that parents review wills and trust agreements with their children while they're still alive?
It's so crucial, Alan, because you want to avoid the problem with my brother and sister. It can happen on the smallest of things that people don't understand, and it really makes sense to say, if my father had just said to my brother, "You know what? I get it that you don't like this, but this is my money and this is what I'm going to do." And it would have resolved that problem. So it makes it a lot easier for the family members to be able to understand what the parents are doing, what their motivations are. They can hear it right from them. And the fact that they can get all their questions answered and concerns addressed while the parents are there. It really is.
So I'm visiting here today with Richard Del Monte. He is the author of Endless Inheritance. Richard, why don't you give the address once again and how a person can get a hold of you?
The website is www.aplaceofpossibility.com.